Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Wild Dispatch. We've got an absolute belter for you today, this time with Bailey Sonora. In the few conversations I had with Bailey, it quickly became clear that she spent her whole life close to the wild. Through her travels across America, she's learned to cherish the skills and processes it takes to really make the most of the natural world. She's met some incredible people and learned many amazing techniques, from tanning hides to bare horseback riding, even the occasional spontaneous dismount. And actually, she's even taken part in many big game hunts with huge animals, things as big as elk and moose and even buffalo. She's got a great story and a wonderful perspective on how to live in harmony with nature. But it's time for me to stop talking and actually let her speak for herself. Here's Bailey Sonora.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch.
Bailey Sonora, welcome to the Wild Dispatch. It's lovely to have you aboard.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here this morning.
So we've had a couple of previous conversations, and it really sounds like you've had some amazing experiences in the wild. Most recently, you got back from a horse pack trip, I believe, in the Gila Wilderness. You've also done lots of other things in kind of passing. You've had some amazing experiences on hunting trips, chasing big game as big as buffalo. And I guess the thing that would make sense, though, is for us to go back to right to the beginning, which I think you grew up in the desert, right? And I remember you telling me about tracking quail and just living a life outside. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yes, well, I was born in Phoenix and I grew up mostly in Tucson. I lived inside a home, of course, but I would always venture outside and be observing nature, coloring photos, tracking quail, kind of making stories of their life. And I remember as a young child, my mom always having to really wrangle me to come inside at nighttime because I just wanted to be outside. And I continue to find that now in my adult life that I'm happiest in nature and I'm at peace to go to nature and be able to center myself there. I feel that I'm able to really be what it means to be a human being when I'm in the natural world.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. And it's amazing that you had that. I mean, I guess you had that awareness and that drive right from the beginning, right? And it's so fun. I mean, tell me more. These, I was so curious. So the quail, you just see a track because in the desert, I guess it's in the sand. Is that right? So the tracks probably don't last very long if the wind's blowing or something like that. Would you follow them to like their runs or? Wow.
Yes, actually, the tracking was more so following them of where they were going, how they were making their homes. They tend to nest under brush
Okay.
and they'll drag brush and make their homes under fallen branches.
Oh.
So I would follow them kind of throughout the course of their day, going into this home, coming out. Seemed that they would always go back in the evening time and they would come out in the early morning.
And would that always be? I mean, I spend a bit of time out in the desert, and I mean the heat can be, wild. Was it kind of dependent on seasons? You were doing it more in the winter or in the summer as well?
Yes, I do remember it's when it was more cool
Mm.
outside. I also feel that the desert that I grew up in, the Sonoran Desert, is significantly becoming hotter as the years go
Oh, is it?
by. Yes, I think
Mm.
a large part of that has to do with the city that's built and all of the concrete. It tends to retain the heat. So I think animals are out
Okay.
less in the daytime as when I remembered them when I was little. They would, and even myself, I was able to stay out all day in 110-degree weather and be just fine and perfectly happy. But now it feels a lot more intense.
Wow. It sounds intense. I can imagine it was pretty intense even back then. 110. Wow. So did you? I'm curious. You slather up with sun cream at the beginning of the day. I would be roasted if I was out in that weather.
I didn't. It's interesting. I found that there, as a child and as adult, I would never wear sunscreen and I would be just fine. My skin would adjust. I had a lot darker complexion there, but I find where I live now, I'm at higher elevation, so here my skin becomes more affected.
Oh, okay,
Um, but
okay.
there, it was just fine.
Well, that's great. Amazing. Okay, so you were in the desert, and then what was the next step? I guess you grew up there. You spent your whole childhood in the desert.
No, the later half in grade school, I moved to a place called Palm Desert, California.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's near a place more people commonly know it being close to Joshua Tree. And that was significant for me as well because it continued. I would get out of school and be out on hikes all day. Or on the weekends, I would spend my weekends in Joshua Tree or go up one of the highways and be hiking. And the friends that I had all loved to be in nature. So we were constantly outside. And I love it. It has enabled me to form a relationship with the places that I've grown and been and go back to these places and remember the landscape and the trails and
So actually, Joshua Tree was where I spent about 6 months, and there's
oh,
something, yeah, something amazing about that place, and I'm sure it's probably much the same everywhere, but I don't know what it is, but yeah, there's just something incredible about that area, and there's lots of hiking. Yeah, you're right. I'm trying to remember. I think it's the 62 maybe. I have very fond memories of that area. So, okay, so you spent a lot of time around there too, and I also did the same. And it's incredible, right? There's so much amazing stuff to discover. I remember hiking, you're on a trail for a while, but then there's a dried out little creek coming down a mountain that you're just curious about, that you want to go up through the stones, and maybe you find like a rattlesnake or something there. There's so much amazing stuff around. It feels like it might be a desolate place, but actually it's full of life when you spend time there, right?
yes, and so many caves too.
Oh wow, tell me about the caves.
My closest friend in my life, Marley Ben Shalom, we would always venture to Joshua Tree together. That's why I have my most fondest memories with her. And she would take us in these caves, and you climb into these caves, and you really have to navigate yourself through the rocks and be able to lift one another and climb up top, and then you end up high in the sky on top of these rocks that we would have not been able to get to otherwise unless we rock climbed.
We're together.
Yes, it does feel that Joshua Tree has all of these dimensions that are so wonderful.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. So, so bring me up to the kind of the next step. You spend a lot of time there, and then I know that you spent more time further east than that. Is that the next step in your life?
Yes, and then I moved to Oregon and the Idaho areas,
Okay.
and
Oh, well, that's
there
north, I
I,
guess. Yeah. Okay, both. It's a
yes,
big swing. Go on.
quite a big circle now when I look back at it. Yeah, I had moved to Oregon and Idaho, and there at that time I began becoming interested in taking care of deer. I was seeing a lot of deer hit on the side of the roads, and I felt that this is so tragic because of the way we live today. All of these wild animals are becoming hurt, and then they're just left on the side of the road with no respect and no honor. So I began becoming interested. Well, how do I take care of these animals? And then when a hunter has a kill, how do I take care of this? So I started off reading books, how to tan hides, and I had one friend help show me how to skin a hide. And then from there, I met friends. It seemed that just through my interest, I think life works that way.
Mm-hmm.
It seems
Yeah.
that when we become interested or we have these questions, all of creation comes to help embrace us. How we can learn to establish and grow and sustain this connection with the earth.
Yeah.
So that's how it seemed that I was holding in my heart this care for animals and people, and then somehow was blessed with wonderful people in my life that I truly could have not imagined come into my life and help nurture this interest
Yeah.
and help me to learn and to build a relationship together tending to the animals, because it's really not much just doing it with oneself.
Hmm.
Where I found the most joy and the most in-depth learning is with people and sharing that and having those memories that truly make living life worthwhile.
Oh, yeah. You speak to my heart on that one. It's true. I mean, it relates to everything, doesn't it? Like an experience shared is so much more magical than on your own. I mean, it might not be for everyone. Maybe it's just we're extroverts. I don't know. That's speculation. But yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, I know a lot of the trips that I've done off in the wilderness, you can have some amazing experiences, but if you actually share that experience with someone and the conversations and the excitement that you share afterwards, it's incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, and that's so wonderful to hear of your experiences as well. I I remember you mentioning that you had both just got was it a blacktail off the coast?
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to remember which story this is. Oh, yes. No, that's true. Yeah, we did. Got one. Oh, actually, let me think about that. I was on my own for that trip. Oh, so, yeah, no, although I did tell lots of people and we shared the story afterwards, but yeah, no, it was good. It was, I have spent a lot of time in that area though with people. So I guess in a way, when you have shared an area with people, you are able to relate those stories more clearly, right? Because they understand what's going on. It's not just I was hiding behind a bush and a deer came along. It's they know where you are, they know the topography, they understand the kind of the journey you've been on with that.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, so I'm curious. You were saying about meeting an amazing group of people and learning to tan hides. And in the future, at this podcast, I'd love to pick your brains about that because I do have a blacktail that is ready to be tanned. I'd love to learn that process. But so, can you tell me a little bit more about how you met?
Yes, I went to a gathering. It's called a natural skills gathering. I'm trying to remember the name of that one. Saskatoon. It's held in Twisp, Washington.
Okay, great, amazing. Maybe we can put a link in the show notes.
So I went there simply to meet a girlfriend and drop her off a present. And there I had met friends who eventually helped show me how to tan hides, and formed, a lifelong friendship through that. And that's where it began.
Was that what inspired you to move to further inland to Idaho?
Yes. So then I then moved to Idaho with my friends and had learned from a very dear friend of mine, Burnett Lee Whiteplume, and he is the main person in my life who has shown me so much, and his wife, Ramona. Continuously to this day, I'm always asking him, what do I do with the hide this way? And, what if it's looking like this? How do I take care?
Yeah, I mean, I'm envious. I have to say, it sounds amazing. Like, I think having people like that in your life, when it's something that you're so passionate about, and it sounds like this is something you've been interested in a simple sense of your connection to the wild from the very beginning of your life. But to find people who are such kind of an inspiration, but also a resource, like an endless resource of information to tell you what to do, or like understand your next steps in your learning process. That must be so nice.
Yes, and I would say it's not as, I guess sometimes I do ask questions, but it's more, they're encouraging of just doing it
Hmm.
together. So I try to err on the side of, not asking too many questions and just doing it together. And same, they'll be like, just the more you do it, the more that we learn. And I find that each hide has a story. Every hide is different. Some hides are fairly easy to tan. Some of them are extremely challenging and take quite a few times.
Mm.
Some of them, when we're scraping, I find that they'll bring up different emotions. It feels as if when I'm peeling back the layers of the deer hide,
Mm.
it's peeling back layers within myself.
Wow.
So sometimes it's easy and seamless, and sometimes it is just so challenging, and sometimes I'll even, become frustrated, and it's incredible, the transformation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's amazing. So tell me, and is that variety even within the same species? Like the hides happen to be just different between different animals?
Yes, between different animals and also their age.
Okay.
So the younger an animal is, say the younger a doe or a buck, it's actually harder to tan their hide because their collagen is still so tight
Oh.
and their fibers are so tight, it's harder to break them down.
Oh,
So the
okay.
older an animal it is, the easier. But also, they can be the same age, but it just depends on how thick their skin is and spiritually. That's why some hides, someone may ask, well, how many times do I soften it or how many times do I brain it?
Hmm.
It just depends. Some hides you can do it in one go, brain it once, soften it once, and some we do 5 times.
I got a question in my mind. So, do you have a recollection of the first animal the first hide that you tanned, like that you kind of processed? Do you have a story about that?
Yes, I do. It was actually a deer that had just been hit in front of me. And at the time I picked that deer up, put it in my truck bed and brought it home.
And was this in Oregon or was this in Idaho?
This was in Oregon.
Okay.
And this was by myself, and I hadn't had anyone to show me yet how to properly skin and take care of all of the meat. So I did it according to this reading that I had done in a book. My
Okay.
brother had got me the book, and I'll need to remember who it is and look it up and share,
Okay.
because it kind of goes through, how to do everything, how to dress the deer. And so I brought the deer home and I hung it up and I did it by myself. And it was a very intimate um, time together for my first time just figuring it out.
Yeah. And
So I,
oh, I was going to say, what feelings were you having? Because you said that it can really vary with each experience.
I was feeling quite excited. It's like, great. I felt like I'm made to do this. I love this. It felt like coming home to myself, one of my favorite things to do. And at that time, I didn't know how deep this relationship with hides would be in my life and continues to
Yeah.
deepen. So it was a lot of fun for me. And I was very happy actually that I was alone, able to do this. But I do remember softening it, and I was softening it over a beam, and I had gotten it completely soft, and so I felt so accomplished, and I felt, oh, this is great. And I laid it down on the table, and then sure enough, it dried and it got all stiff again because I didn't know from experience that it can be completely soft, but if it has any coolness in the hide when you touch it to your cheek, then when it dries, it's going
Hmm.
to dry stiff again. You have to keep working it
Oh,
until it is bone dry and there's no element of coolness within the hide.
okay.
So it was my first learning of, oh, actually, this takes a lot more work softening than I thought.
Oh, I think I can relate directly because I actually was lucky enough to get a bear a few years ago and decided that I was going to go through the process of working the hide, and not one of my proudest moments, I have to say. Like, I think I had some feelings of frustration, and I was definitely, when it's something new, there's always that feeling of not understanding what's going on exactly. You're trying to interpret information from books and the internet and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, definitely by the end, I had a hide that was not the softest. So yeah, I might have to pick your brains about if there's a way to fix that. I don't know. But so we've talked about hides now, but I'd love it if, well, actually, maybe first of all, let's go to the other end of the spectrum. I think you've mentioned that you've been lucky enough to go on, buffalo hunts, and had some amazing experiences with that. Have you tanned buffalo hide as well?
I have, and yes, but it's a community effort. There's no way I would ever do it by myself or want to do. And I really was only able to do that through my friends and my friendship with them.
Yeah, I'm so curious. So, how many people would it take to work on a buffalo hide? Like, in terms of how many people and how long do you think?
I think two people can do it just fine. Um,
Okay,
it's, the more people, the better, which is amazing,
okay.
especially kids. To be able to have kids jump on top and soften is really the best. And then it depends on how big it is. If it's a cow, if it's a
Hmm.
calf, if it's a bull, then, if you have a big bull, you probably don't want just two people working on it.
I can
You'd want
imagine.
more. And the same goes for any hide that someone wants to keep the hair on. Or even if it's a big hide, say if it's an elk or a moose and someone still takes the hair off, they're pretty big hides and it takes a community
Takes
effort.
work.
That's not to
Yeah.
say some people can't do it on their own. I'm sure there's people who have and who do, but it's really enjoyable and helps a lot when you have multiple people.
Yeah, I can imagine. My only experience was on my own, but thankfully it wasn't a very large hide. Um, but how big? I'm just trying to get an idea because I obviously have never. I don't think I've ever even come across a buffalo before. So how big is a hide? You know, it must be huge.
Pretty huge. I'm not that great with measurements. So I'll
Okay,
say I can
okay.
measure kind of, showing. Um,
So arms width. If you were to hold your arms out from side to side, how tall are you?
I'm 5'7", so probably
Okay, so
taller.
about the same arm
And
width.
again, it depends on if it's a cow or a calf. I might
Yeah.
be as big spread out as a calf hide. So that's a
Okay.
baby.
Okay.
But if it's a bull,
Wow.
it's going to be, yes, much taller than both of us and long as well.
Now I can understand why that's such a big job. So,
Yes.
okay, so my next hide that I have to work on, well, I don't have to, I want to, um, is a blacktail, and it's not a huge one. The blacktails around here are not enormous, but I'd love if you wouldn't mind just talking through. If I was to go through the step by step process, um, how would I go through the process of getting this to like a soft, nice hide?
Of course. Well, is it salted or frozen?
I skinned it, and I skinned it as close to the hide as I could. Because I learned from the bear that if you leave a lot of flesh on the hide, it creates a lot of extra work. So I tried to be very patient, and I skinned it the best I could. So there isn't a great deal of flesh on the hide, and then I put it in the freezer. So I don't know if that was the wrong thing to
Wonderful.
do.
No, that's a great thing to do.
Okay,
That's a
yeah,
wonderful thing to do. I would do you have a fleshing beam or a fleshing knife?
I have a
Or
fleshing
the
knife.
fleshing knife that goes down,
So
the
it's like
draw
a
knife?
curved. So just to kind of just help explain, a fleshing knife, and I'm sure lots of people know what this is, but it's like a curved blade, right, with two handles. If I'm correct, yeah.
Yes.
And so I have that. I actually have a friend who is a woodworker, but he also makes tools. And I had something which was similar, and then he sharpened it up for me and got it's a bevel just on one side. Is that right? I think.
Yes.
So that's the way in which you scrape. So using the side that's not the sharp side, you can scrape and get the. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to do your job for you. You go ahead.
No, you're doing great. You're helping, explain what the fleshing knife is, and people can use even a draw knife if they need, or originally get a shin bone of an animal and sand one side of that down.
How cool.
But the first step would be take the hide out of the freezer, let it thaw, and
Hmm.
then let it soak in water for a few days.
Okay.
And the important part is to track the water with the temperature outside. If it's a hot day or they're hot days, make sure to keep checking the water, replacing the water, making sure the hide isn't getting too hot.
Okay.
Usually on a cold day, we'll leave a hide soaking for 2 to 3 days. On a warm day, 1 to 2 days.
Okay.
And how we tell is we'll go to the hide and pull off the hair. And when the hair starts coming off really easily,
Hmm.
that's when we can take it out. I usually hang it up, let it drip dry a little bit, and then put it on the fleshing beam and start fleshing off all of the flesh from the inside of the hide, the side that's closest to the meat.
Yes.
So we're fleshing off any of that extra meat,
Hmm.
extra fat, and then turning it over and fleshing off the hair.
Okay, I have
And
one quick question. Sorry to
yes,
interrupt. So you said like hot days is 1 to 2 days, and cooler days is, did you say 3 to 4 days?
yes.
So what kind of temperatures are we talking here? Because where I am on the coast in California, it's very consistent. The temperature doesn't change a great deal, even between, I think, well, arguably winter and summer. But so what kind of temperatures are you talking?
Well, let's see. I had hide recently in the river, which it preferably it's nice to tie up a hide in the river because then that moving water helps getting that hair and that grain to really fluff up and not have the water be stagnant. And I recently put quite a decent size elk hide in the river, and I thought I was going to be okay with it being 2 days. And I think the temperature was about 90 degrees out, and it was too hot. And so the hide was spoiled, even being in the river.
Wow,
So
that's a
it's
shame.
it's yeah, it is. Well, it's something to watch just with your temperature maybe going out,
Hmm.
3 times a day and checking it and seeing.
That's curious because I would have imagined, I guess it depends where the water's coming from with the river. Because sometimes water can be deceptively cold, like I've spent time in
Yes.
South Africa where it's 105, 110, and you're hiking in the mountains and it's so hot and you feel like even your sweat's drying, and finding then, the top of like near like kind of a little canyon in a mountain, and there's a waterfall and a plume, and you get in there and it's even possibly too cold where you can barely
Oh,
stay
wow.
in it because it's ice cold. So it's strange how some water can be different. So I'm guessing the river that you put the elk in, was it not like a heavy flow of water, or it just wasn't that cold?
It was a decent flow, but we had a heat wave, and
Mm.
yeah, I was shocked. I was shocked. I thought that it would be okay, but it just taught me that, again, a reminder, even when it's really warm and hot outside, to really be checking the hide at least twice a day. And, I had left it for 2 days and thought it was going to be okay.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we
So,
all we learn our lessons.
yes.
Um, okay, so I interrupted you before. Let's pick up where you were. You were talking about scraping the hide and taking the flesh off the inside of the hide, which can be quite a process in itself, I believe, right? At least it was
Yes.
for me.
Yes. That's quite a process.
So you place the hide over a beam, is that right?
Yeah, so you can use a wood beam and use a draw knife to scrape off all of the bark so that any of that bark does not pierce holes or make big scratches or indents in the hide. So it has to be a completely smooth beam. So you
Yes.
can use a
Okay.
wood beam or even a PVC pipe. Um, and some people prefer to scrape downwards, and some people prefer to hang up the hide on a beam and be scraping
Mm.
down. It's all preference and how someone feels comfortable. And scraping the hair part, I find, is the most challenging because you scrape off all the hair, but then you have to get that grain layer that's underneath the hair, and it's a pretty hard layer, so you're having to apply a lot of pressure to get
Mm.
that second layer off. If that layer's on, that hide will not be able to soak up the any solution that it's in and be able to soften.
Okay, so I think I was visualizing something a little different from you. So actually, what you're talking about is another extra step, which is you've taken the flesh off the inside of the hide, and then
Yes.
actually you take the hair off as well. So this is just to create, I guess, the leather effectively. Is that right?
Yes, and so you'll scrape the inside of the hide, the flesh
Mm-hmm.
off, and then when we turn it over and there's that hair side, we're scraping off the hair, but then underneath the hair is a layer of grain that holds the hair. And
Wow.
that's the toughest part of the hide. And that's
Okay.
what needs to be scraped off in very uniformly because if there's little bits of the that grain left on the hide, it's one, not going to soak evenly, and then it'll show too after. Often you can kind of see on a lot of hides, sometimes we as people accidentally leave a little bit of grain, and that's not okay. You got to get off all the grain for it to be smooth and uniform.
Wow, that sounds like, I mean, it was already incredibly difficult for me doing the first part, but that sounds really hard. So, yeah, that must be, yeah, remarkable. Okay, so say you've gone through this process, and I'm sure it sounds like you've got to be very honest with yourself if you've got that, if you've got it done right, that stage. So then what's the next step?
And once the hide is all hydrated and soaked, it is challenging. It takes effort, it takes continuous effort, but you'll find yourself getting into a groove with it and feeling
Okay,
like, oh, this is that grain layer that peels back, because the grain on top will be a darker tan color. It'll look like a
okay,
tan skin, and then when you peel that off, it'll be completely white. So when you're getting to that white layer of the skin, that's that layer that we want. So we're peeling back all that tan part on the top.
okay,
And the next step, once that's completely done, fleshed, hair and grain off, then I usually rinse it because there's usually little hairs stuck to it everywhere. Um, Rinse it and then hang it up over a beam. And then it comes time to wring out the hide. And there's a certain way to fold the hide into itself and put a wood beam that also has no bark on it, or you can use the end of a shovel too, any sort of tool that's clean, and then you're wringing it out, and this is wringing out all the extra moisture of the hide.
so kind of twisting, is it, I've kind of seen this with other things. Maybe I'm wrong with this. So is it wrapping around and then twisting around that beam, and then just using that as kind of like a point of rigidity against it, so that you can really get a tight twist. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
and you want to do a tight twist so that it's wringing out, but don't go too tight, because if we twist it too tight, it actually pops and will pop a hole in the
Oh
hide.
wow.
So it's just, you just find just enough tension where you're having a lot of resistance, but not going beyond that point to where it will pop.
Wow. Okay. So is the next phase drying or tanning or?
Yeah, so the next phase, once we have it all ringed out, then you'll pull it out, and you're pulling all the ends of the hide apart from each other so that it's even, and then usually hang it to dry just a little bit, or begin to rack it up at that point.
Okay.
So then it's piercing the sides of the hole and racking it up to onto a frame. That way it gives you some time where it's not going to dry before you have it racked up.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I completely missed the braiding part. We skipped
Okay.
ahead.
Go on.
So after we have it all fleshed on the beam, and then you hang it up to dry, we let it dry completely. So it's bone
Okay.
dry. That way it's thirsty. And then we make a
Okay.
solution of brain water. And usually this consists
Okay.
of either a whole brain if you're going to use a few hides in one bucket, or in this case, if we're doing one hide, you can use half a brain. Blend that up in a blender with lukewarm water, and then fill a 5-gallon bucket with lukewarm water. Now, the water is supposed to be lukewarm, not cold, and not too hot, or it will boil the hide. So just enough to where you can
Okay.
keep your hand in it for 5 seconds. Because that warmth is what will open up the hide's pores and help it to assimilate the solution. So we make
Okay.
our brain water, and then once that hide is bone dry, all fleshed, all grained, then you put it into the brain water and leave it. You can leave it for half a day, you can leave it for a whole day, just depends. Um,
So it actually sounds pretty hot if you can only keep your hand in it for 5 seconds. I mean, it's not boiling, but it's pretty
yeah,
warm.
pretty warm, pretty warm.
Okay.
And just on that point to where it's not too warm, because we've seen hides be put into too hot water and they come out and they're completely cooked, and then at
Wow.
that point they're done.
It's useless.
Yeah.
It seems like there are so many high risk moments in the whole process where it could go wrong. And I guess that's part of the learning process, right? You can only do your best, and sometimes things don't go quite right.
I think it requires so much attentive detail, even the example to where I think I've tanned a good fair amount of hides. And, even my last elk hide I left in the water for too long. And so it's just that friendly reminder that it takes so much attention to detail. They're not something we can just put in any sort of water or leave out. It's kind of, we have to be on top of
Mm.
it. Once we begin the process, we've got to have the time and the space to be on top of it. But
Yeah, it sounds like it's definitely a commitment.
yes, but there's certain points that you can pause in them. For instance, you could grain a hide, take off all the flesh, grain
Hmm.
it, let it dry, keep it bone dry, and then just keep it like that. I mean, it will keep like that for a year, and then it'll just be
Okay.
stored and ready to be put in the brain water whenever that time comes.
Okay, perfect. So
Or
great.
even we've put ours in brain water, leave it in that solution, pull it out, wring it out, and then keep it in the fridge for a day if we have to wait the next day to then begin the next step. So there's points where we can pause, and then there's points where you can't stop at all, especially in the softening phase.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Like the amount of skill required in order to understand every step and how to do everything perfectly. Yeah, it's definitely, I'm a long way away, but it's an exciting process. So I'm keen to jump in and start learning. I'm sure through my mistakes.
I'm sure, and you sound close. I'm sure it will go smoothly.
Okay, great. So, you've been living, well, you were living in Idaho, if that's correct, for, was it 5 years?
Yes,
Can you talk a little bit about that?
yes.
About kind of your experiences there, maybe tagging along on hunting trips and learning about that process?
Yeah, a little bit. Those times with my friends,
Hmm.
they're so intimate. And so they're those kind of memories that to talk about them in this way, uh, yeah, they're kind of just special memories that aren't talked about so much. Um,
Yeah. Okay. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So then you're also, well, okay. So something that we haven't even touched on now is you've had a long relationship riding horses. Um,
yes.
so, and I know you just got back from a horseback trip. So can you talk a bit about like when did you start riding?
So I just started writing fairly early in my adult life. It was about 5 years ago.
Hmm.
And it was through a close friend. So I just started writing 5 years ago, but since then I've been in love and felt that I should have been writing my whole life. And it brings me the most joy and passion. And yeah, it's a very intimate relationship with the horses, just like the hides. They teach me so much
Mm.
about myself and where I'm at, and help me to grow in strength and happiness and boundaries. Horses are great for being strong in boundaries.
When you were starting to learn to ride, was that something that I mean, you must have felt it as a like a driving force within you, like, oh, I want to connect with these horses, and I want to ride and I guess experience the world a little bit through their eyes. But was it a difficult process at the beginning, learning to ride and build a relationship with, I guess, is it one horse or multiple horses that you ride?
Yes, I ride multiple horses, and it's intimidating. Some horses are very gentle down and they're not intimidating to be around at all, and some of them are not as used to humans or specifically yourself. Horses will often test individuals. And so sometimes it would be very intimidating if they would, act up, rear up, or blow up. And yeah, but
Have you ever? I was gonna say, have you ever been unfortunate enough to like be tossed by a horse? Like, that doesn't want you around?
I haven't been fortunate enough yet, or I haven't been bucked off, which I'm
Okay.
sure that day will come. I've come very close to being bucked off and managed to stay on due to skills that my close friend taught me of how to turn them in tight circles so that they can't keep bucking.
Okay.
But I have definitely flown out of the saddle, running, going really fast, and just come around a corner, and I've flown off and hit my head actually a few times.
Wow, hit your head.
Oh,
Was that
yes.
on a branch or how?
Well, it was a rock. My first time bareback riding, I had never bareback rode before. I always wanted to.
Hmm.
And a friend, I said, "Hey, can I come on this ride with you guys?" It was like a 16-mile ride. And he was like, "Yeah, I have an extra horse, but I don't have an extra saddle." So I said, "Great, I'll try bareback."
Okay.
And he thought I was kind of nuts. He was like, "Really? Okay, if you want to try." I said, "Yes, I do." So I hopped on and, it was going great in the beginning. And then I asked the horse to run and we started running. And that's when I flew off running bareback for my first time.
Oh wow.
I hit my head on a rock and it was fine. It was a little bit hard to see for a moment, but I was told that if you fall off a horse, you just get back up and get on, especially because you have to not let your horse get away. So I did
Yes.
just that. And I got back on and I was just so happy to be out riding that I did not care.
Really?
I did not make a fuss about it. I didn't complain. I didn't worry. It's just like, okay, yeah, I'm good. Let's keep riding. And it was one of the best rides of my life.
Really?
Hmm.
Wow, sounds like a bit of a turning point. Amazing. I can. Oh wow, you're braver than I. I've ridden horses a little, but there's definitely I understand what you're saying about. There's some respect and a little bit of fear on my part. Like such a huge animal, like it's definitely you're at the whims of moods and emotions, and yeah, I guess it comes
Yes.
with practice.
And they're also looking to us in a way of, is the way it's been told to me. They're looking to us to be a leader for them to feel safe because they
Okay.
are a prey animal. So, when we get bucked off or fall off or they act up, it's up to us to show them, no, one, either we're not going to put up with this or yeah, we're still going to get back on you and ride it out. And it helps them calm down. And it's helped everything with horses helps to translate into my life because sometimes if I have a challenging day or say someone challenges me and questions me, how committed are you? How much do you want this? Due to horses, I'm able to really stand up for myself. If I feel like I'm getting bucked off in life or getting kicked, sideways from one direction of my life, I can be like, no, I'm strong. I got this. I'm still gonna saddle up essentially. And so they're so incredible for translating over to every aspect of life.
Yeah. I mean, it must require some mental strength to be thrown off a horse and hit your head on a rock, not be able to quite see properly for a while, and then just get back on. So, yeah, it makes everything else seem less intimidating for sure.
Yes.
So now, I guess you've been riding. Well, okay. I'm also curious. Did you continue to do bareback riding after that? Do you continue to ride like that, or do you predominantly use saddles?
I do. I predominantly use saddles, but I do for fun.
Okay.
For instance, on our recent 6-day pack trip in the Gila, there was one of the days that we had gotten to camp a little bit early. So I said, let's take off our saddles and just go bareback and go ride around. And we did that. So I do it for the fun and the joy, or sometimes if I'm in the corral, I'll just hop on
Yeah.
like that just to have some fun. But for trail rides, I go on the saddle.
Okay. So yeah, that brings us to your most recent and I guess longest pack trip that you've done with horses. Tell me more about it. So you said it's in the Gila Wilderness, is that right?
Yes, and I had just learned that the Gila Wilderness was the first established
Oh
wilderness
wow.
in, this area of the United States alongside Alaska, and it's also the biggest wilderness.
And what's it like there?
It's there's a lot of water.
Oh okay.
There's the Gila River. There's a lot of steep canyons. On top of the canyons, there's a lot of ponderosa pine.
Hmm.
So it's wonderful. There's a lot of forest area and then open meadows and canyons and ravines.
Okay, and it's a little bit of elevation as well, I think, right? Like
It
it's,
is.
if I remember.
I'm not sure exactly the elevation, but there is a higher elevation.
Great. So you spent time there, and how far were you riding each day, or were you going like point to point? You knew that you were going to be traveling through an area, or was it more a circular kind of long, multi-day affair?
We didn't track miles, but we would track points. So we would wake up in the morning and we'd say, okay, we're gonna try to make it down to this creek and
Okay.
see how this area is to camp. So we would just wake up, have breakfast, ride the whole day until evening time, get all the saddles and tack off, make dinner, and go to sleep. So we
Simple.
just consistently kept that. And it was so incredible. There were times that the trail would disappear for a long time and we'd kind of just have to find our way and navigate. And the horse I rode, Jet, was just so amazing at finding the trail when I couldn't find it anymore.
Really?
You know, it just kind of be looking the direction I wanted to go, and she would somehow find the trail before I was able to see it.
I mean, that's very cool. Like a mutual trust of one another.
Yes, and on the steep canyons and steep cliffs, you know, some of these are quite dangerous. There was one instance where my horse, her back feet fell down the cliff, and if she would have fallen, you know, I'm sure we would have not survived.
Really?
But yes, it was kind of a moment, but I didn't freak out. I trusted her because someone had told me once, you know, when you're on steep canyons and you're on the edges of cliffs, you're more safe on the back of your horse because they have four legs
Hmm.
and we have two. So don't get off your horse and try to lead them down. You know, just stay on your horse. And I found that to be very helpful and be very true for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes absolute sense, doesn't it? I mean,
Yes.
I've watched many four-legged animals skip up cliffs in a remarkable way, and yeah, there's no way that I would be following them up there. So
Yes.
it definitely makes sense to have the extra two legs. Yeah, for sure. So did you have any interactions with animals while you were there, or did you see anything else, like anything else cool, or any? Did you hear any good stories, or?
Interesting enough, I heard some great stories from my close friend Joe Signs. He's a wonderful Apache man here. So
Okay.
this trip, you know, was going through his traditional homelands. So
Oh
he was
wow.
able to speak to this area, speak to his history, speak to stories of the land, and he was actually just featured in the latest National Geographic. And there's a
Wow.
wonderful article of, you know, him and there in photo, and he takes people on these pack trips. So it's a very intimate trip.
Yeah.
I found something interesting too, that every morning I would wake up and have a good thought, and I was really hoping to see a bear. Really
Yes.
hoping to see a bear and an eagle. And just 2 days ago, I went back out to the Gila, and when I was least expecting it, I saw a bear and an eagle. And what it showed me was that how important it is what we talk about in our daily lives, what we're thinking and what we're wanting. And sometimes what we're wanting, we can want it so badly, and to not lose hope that those things might not come true if we don't see them right away, if we don't see them within that week, within that
Hmm.
month. You know, sometimes times later, those prayers or those good thoughts will come true and show them to ourselves. And I think what you're doing, Robin, is so important because I think about the conversations we have as human beings, what we're calling into our lives, just our daily quality of life. And here you are, you're having conversations with people about the natural world, about people's connection to the natural world and relationship. And I think that is such a wonderful way to be and such a meaningful way to be. And I really value, you know, you for that and
Oh.
this conversation and the conversations that you're having.
Oh, thanks very much. It's yeah. I
Yes.
mean, the feeling's mutual. It's very it's definitely something I've experienced, and it sounds like I was perhaps later to this process than you and your amazing connection with the wild. But there is this incredible connection that we can feel, right? When we're out in the wilderness, there's almost a restorative nature that it provides. And yeah, I don't know, there's just a calm that comes from being out in a place and feeling like you belong there to an extent. And I'm by no means am I there yet, but it's an ambition of mine to meet more people and hear more stories and learn as much as I can. So it's exciting to hear these amazing stories of people out in the wild and their connections.
Yeah,
So
and I will add that, it is such a gift to go out and be in the wild. And
mhm.
also, I believe that often I will hear sometimes excuses, to say this in a kind way. People will say, "Oh, I can't because of this and that." And sometimes that is the case, especially if someone has a physical disability to get out in nature.
Mhm.
That's where it's really tough and challenging, and it takes support of one another to get to these places. But
Yeah.
even if it's visiting the nearest running water, stream or creek, I believe that being out in the wild in nature is a priority. So often I share
Mm.
with people, no, I don't just go out and spend time in nature because I don't have a job or don't have stuff to do. I also am on the computer a lot and have a daily life where I have bills to pay and these things, but I make it a priority to be in nature for health. I think that that's the greatest health insurance, and it takes that acknowledgement on our parts as human beings to be like, you know what, yes, no matter what I have going on, it's a priority to drive 10 minutes to go into nature or spend some time. And I think that just that little bit of encouragement, I hope for people to hear that, to give ourselves that permission that it's okay to take this time out for ourselves. And not only is it okay, but it's absolutely necessary.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It's definitely essential. It's yeah, one of those things where I think they've actually I'm quoting something that I cannot make a specific reference to now,
That's okay.
but they've but they have proven that people who spend time in nature longer, live longer, and they are healthier. There's something that happens. It's not even just eating organic food, or it's like, I think even to the point where people who are gardeners, who spend a lot of time in their gardens, are generally healthier. They have like a better gut biome and all those kinds of things. So yeah, it's very interesting how just our presence in nature biologically is, yeah, it's better for us. So long may it last.
Yes.
So I'm wondering now, is there anything else or any other part of your story that you feel that you'd love to share with us today?
I'm sure. I think that I'd like to share, I truly believe there's an inherent connection with water.
Okay.
When we go as human beings to visit running water and say we have a lot of worries on our mind, stresses or concerns, or even thoughts and hopes that we want for our life,
Hmm.
I find that when we go to visit water and we're able to express that to the water, that there's a part of us that is healed, that just that those moving elements of the water helps those emotions and those thoughts to continue on in a good way. The water helps take it for us
Hmm.
and also helps to carry our good thoughts. Water is so significant that even salmon, are born in very high creeks and streams, and they're able to navigate and find their way home through elemental imprints, signatures that are within the water and the elements.
Yeah.
So even that shows how important and how true it is that water is alive, that there is signatures in water, there's imprints in nature. And so the more that we as humans can go visit the water and take care of our lives, I think the more healthy and balanced we can we can be for ourselves, and to have trust in nature, trust ourselves to be out in nature, trust that we're going to be okay, and
Yeah.
that nature isn't a place to be afraid of. It is a place to, of course, be aware, but to not be afraid. And I think the farther we venture out and the more we venture out, the more we feel at home and we feel confident and at peace of being in nature.
Yeah, I definitely can relate, and I'm sure, I guess everyone who's hearing this can relate too. That there's something magical about water, isn't there? Like a calming element to it. In which, I mean, recently, I guess I was in the Lost Coast, which is an area, which is a very kind of untapped area of Northern California, and it's such a great area because I think it was actually when they were figuring out like developing areas, it's so intense. The canyons and the mountains and everything are so jagged and steep that they just couldn't build a good infrastructure there. So it's very wild there. And I definitely have recollections of these recent visits where there was a couple of days, or even we were hiking up a big mountain, and we were taking a lot of water with us already, and we were carrying way too much weight than we should have because of that. But we already, very quickly, it was hot, we needed to get more water. And that moment that you're searching for water, we were looking at maps, trying to think like, okay, maybe this creek that's marked on a map, maybe there is water there right now, but we're going to have to go like try and find a deer trail or something and go down through. But that moment when you're halfway down and you've got like brush in your hair and you're scratched, but you hear that little tinkle, that little sound of a bubbling stream. There's definitely a magical moment, not least because we were thirsty. but also, there's something amazing about it. And so we did go down. We found an amazing little area where we could restock our water supply, and there's a calmness, there's like a feeling that everything's going to be fine. And I guess you really hit the nail on the head there, right? Because we are essentially, what is it, like 2/3 water. Going back to that source is a calming factor. And I've had many times when I'm on hunting trips, walking through riverways and things, it's some of my most favorite areas to move through, because there's a calming, focusing, I guess, nature that you can just move through. And yeah, I don't know, it gives you an extra something that I can't quite put my finger on.
It does, and it's beautiful just to kind of go on this journey with you as you describe it. To imagine, you in these waterways and going out hunting and having that relationship with the elements. I think it's so wonderful and beautiful. I would love to hear more of your hunting trips sometimes as well.
Well, we'll have to have a chat sometime soon, but we'd
Yes.
also love to have you back on at some point if you are off and have some more adventures, and we'd love to have you back on.
Oh, I would love to. That would be amazing. And hear more about your hunting trips.
Okay, great. So I think that's everything. The only thing I was wondering is if you have any kind of presence on social media or anything like that. If there's anything that you wanted to promote while you have a moment, have an audience. If you want people to follow your journeys anywhere, then now's the time. Yeah, we can also put it in the show notes.
Oh, sure. I would love that. I have a Facebook.
Okay.
My name is Bailey Sonora. And then I also have a link to my online website. I have an online shop for mothers,
Okay, great.
pregnant and postpartum mothers. And also, more importantly than that, it's an online reference of informed birth care. So, certain herbs that are safe, certain ways to take care of a woman's placenta. And it really, my website relates to, and I will continue to add more of the importance of caring for our bodies in relation to nature,
Mm.
especially in the pregnancy and postpartum stages. So it'd be wonderful to visit and to reach out anytime. I'd love to talk with anyone and hear everyone's stories too.
Yeah, and that's a whole part which I think maybe I think we're out of time now. It sounds like, but definitely at some point in the future, I'd love to hear more about that whole part of your life which we haven't even talked about yet. So
Oh, that would be wonderful.
great. Okay, so thanks again for coming on the show. And yeah, I hope that you continue to have great experiences out in the wild. And I'd love to reconnect with you sometime soon and hear more about it.
Thank you so much for this time getting to connect with you, and you greatly inspire me.
Oh,
Having this conversation, and I think I'll go put a hide in the water now because it just helps remind me, like, yes, this is the life that we're living. This connection is important in our daily life. So thank you for inspiring me,
oh.
and I hope to have more conversations and hear all the wonderful podcasts to come.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And I'm sure I will be in touch soon when I'm trying to figure out nuances of processing this hide. I would love to just connect with you about
Yes.
that. But yeah, I'm inspired as well, and I'm going to get out there and I'm going to, yeah, do my best and try and make it through all these steps calmly and and
Reach out anytime.
okay, fantastic. All right, well, thanks again, Bailey, and yeah, let's speak soon.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robin.
So that wraps up another episode of the Wild Dispatch. Thanks again to Bailey Sonora for taking the time to share all her experiences and knowledge with us. I know that I'm going to be putting some of that information to good use soon. Fingers crossed it goes well. You can find Bailey on Facebook and be sure to check out her website as well. All the links down in the show notes. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and until next time.